Hello and welcome to Box Sports. Now today we will be looking at the sports events that are guaranteed to be on free-to-air TV in the UK. Why? Because they are protected under the Broadcasting Act of 1996, which deems them to be of national interest. These protected events are designed to keep them away from subscription broadcasters such as Sky Sports and keep them on free-to-air TV channels such as BBC, ITV and Channel 4. This list originated in the early 1990s when Sky Sports began to pay huge amounts of money to obtain the rights to show several sports in the UK, and the big one of course being the Premier League rights from 1992. Now the list itself is split into two groups, A and B. If an event is in Group A, it means that full coverage must be broadcast on free-to-air TV. Group B means that live coverage can be on subscription TV as long as the highlights are shown free-to-air. So which events are included in Group A? Well, the Olympic Games is included, however, there have been a significant change in recent years. In 2015, the International Olympic Committee licensed all broadcasting rights for Europe as one package. American subscription broadcaster Discovery Plus won those rights, but in order to protect the Broadcasting Act of 1996 in the UK, Discovery Plus sub-licensed a portion of those rights back to the BBC for the Tokyo 2020 Games. Now, if anyone remembers coverage of previous games, it was often jam-packed coverage on BBC One, BBC Two, with literally every other event on offer via the red button. However, this wasn't the case for the 2020 Games, and the heavily reduced coverage led to criticism. This is all expected to revert back to the full range of Olympicness for the 2026 Winter Games in Milan. The Paralympics were added to the Group A list in 2019 and will continue to be broadcast on Channel 4 for the Paris Games in 2024. Now on to football, and the Men's Football World Cup and European Championship finals is on the list, with every game of the competition being shown on free-to-air. The competitions have traditionally been split between BBC and ITV, and another recent inclusion to the list has been the women's versions of those competitions, with the same split of games expected to happen between BBC and ITV. That is, however, if FIFA can agree the broadcasting rights deals with the big five European footballing nations. The delayed 2021 European Championship saw a huge increase in viewers in the UK of women's football, with England winning their first major women's trophy. With the home competition being prime time viewing in the UK, this year's Women's World Cup is hosted in Australia and New Zealand, so we can expect some early morning football. To be fair, that's what our friends down under have had to endure every time there's a football match played in Europe. The FA Cup final is also a protected event. This was first broadcast in 1938 on the BBC at a time when only 10,000 people owned a TV, meaning there was many more people actually in the stadium watching it live. The match has become a free-to-air finale to the domestic season. Both BBC and ITV will show the All-Manchester 2023 final. The Scottish FA Cup final is a Group A event for the Scots only. Two horse race meetings are included in Group A. They are the Grand National from Aintree and the Epsom Derby. ITV holds the free-to-air rights for the horse racing in the UK, but is faced with a reschedule for the 2023 event, with the Epsom Derby clashing with the earlier kick-off time of the FA Cup final, giving ITV a marketing open goal with their Derby Day coverage starting with the racing at 1:30, followed by the football at 3 o'clock. Other events in Group A are the longest broadcasting partnership in the history of sports, with the BBC's coverage of Wimbledon set to reach 100 years by the end of its current contract. The Rugby World Cup finals are included, in which ITV holds the current rights, and will show coverage of the 2023 competition in France later this year. And finally in Group A, the Rugby League Challenge Cup final, which is shown on the BBC. Now on to Group B, where only highlights or secondary coverage are required to be free to air. These include cricket test matches played in England. Now, the last test matches that had full coverage on free-to-air TV was the 2005 Ashes series. Helped by some tense and dramatic finishes, the coverage on Channel 4 proved to be extremely popular, with a peak of 8.4 million people watching the conclusion of the fourth test at Trent Bridge. After that successful series, Sky Sports then brought the rights to the live coverage leaving Channel 4, Channel 5 and BBC to show the required secondary coverage over the following years. The Cricket World Cup is also in Group B, however, with England making the final in 2019, Sky and Channel 4 agreed a deal to simultaneously broadcast the final. 8.3 million people tuned in to watch England win their first World Cup in that dramatic super over. The Six Nations makes the list, although currently all matches are shown live in full between BBC and ITV. There's been plenty of calls to protect the Six Nations live coverage and move it to Group A. The Commonwealth Games and the World Athletics Championships are also in Group B. Commonly though, these are also broadcast in full live on the BBC. As two golf competitions finish off Group B, the Ryder Cup and the Open Golf Championship, both of which have highlights shown on the BBC. They had previously broadcast live coverage of the Open until 2015. So how does that list look to you? I'd love to know which events you feel have had their day being protected by free-to-air coverage and which events you feel could be added in the future. So I'll throw a couple of suggestions into the hat. What about the EFL Cup final? It's a big showpiece final happening earlier in the season than the FA Cup final. And I think the competition as a whole goes a long way to showcasing clubs from all four divisions. And even though you'd usually get two Premier League clubs in the final, it would be nice to see that particular event at Wembley get a bit more exposure. The difficulty being though that the EFL Cup final rights are rolled in with the competition rights and the rights for the broadcasts of the Championship, League One and League Two games, in which Sky Sports has recently signed a record deal. Although I'm sure some kind of arrangement could be made, and if the EFL Cup final was to be protected on free-to-air, I'm sure that might even help the popularity of some of the earlier rounds of the competition for the following season. So what about the Championship, League One and League Two playoff finals? You probably won't find a set of football games with more drama than these three. Again, Sky Sports are heavily protective of these rights. They just know how popular they are. Again, I think it would be a good showcase for lower league clubs. Again, they get their big day out at Wembley, and I think in that regard, it wouldn't necessarily affect ticket sales, because if you're a fan of one of those clubs, you're going to do all you can to try and get your ticket to Wembley. For other sports, I think the Cricket T20 Cup Finals Day. Now the T20 Blast competition maybe isn't quite as popular as some of the other T20 competitions around the world. And putting the showpiece Finals Day from Edgbaston on free-to-air, I think would go a long way to improving that. The sticking point here is probably that the T20 Blast is very much a Sky Sports competition now. It's been there for a few seasons. And the BBC and free-to-air have the 100, which is starting to build its own reputation. The Open Championship in golf, I think if there is one golf competition to be shown free-to-air in the UK, it should be the Open Championship. I think it's maybe a shame for a lot of golf fans that in 2015 the BBC stopped showing live coverage of the event and went to highlights only. Now, like I said before, this is protected in Group B, so highlights have to be shown of the event. But it's a shame that avid golf fans can't now follow the event live on free-to-air. The British Grand Prix, now this is one that I had thought would be on the list either for highlights or for live coverage, but actually it isn't. Now I think in recent years, free-to-air providers such as Channel 4 being the most recent one, have made an effort to show the British Grand Prix live and in full, as they know just what a showpiece event this is. However, it would be nice if this could be protected in the future. And finally, the BBL Cup Final. Yes, I'll get onto this probably at a later date. If we're looking for an indoor arena sport in the UK, let's face it, our weather is pretty suited to that, particularly in the winter. Then I think the BBL Cup Final could go a long way to serving that purpose. Basketball is increasing in popularity here in the UK, with the NBA hosting games at the O2 Arena, with the BBC starting to show a few BBL and NBA games live. And I think trying to protect the BBL Cup Final on free-to-air TV could go a long way to increasing the popularity of the sport. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave a comment below, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.